Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From the Arcadian Court in downtown Toronto, welcome to the continuation of the 112th season of the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you just joining us, either through our webcast or our podcast or on Rogers TV, welcome to the meeting. Now, before our distinguished speaker is introduced today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our head table guests. I'd ask that each guest rise for a brief moment and then be seated as your name is called. And I'd ask, please, that the audience refrain from applauding until all of the head table guests have been introduced. So, starting with our guest of honor, Mr. Andy Byford, CEO, Toronto Transit Commission. Ms. Angela Yanuziello, Vice President of the Canada Transit Market Lead at AECOM. Ms. Monica Masciantonio, the Director of Government Affairs, Scotiabank, and a Director at the Empire Club of Canada. Mr. Adam Vaughan, the MP for Spadina, Fort York. Mr. Doug Allingham, the Executive Vice President, Canada for AECOM. Ms. M.J. Perry, who we all had the pleasure of hearing sing a little while ago, the Vice President and owner of Mr. Discount Limited and a Director of the Empire Club of Canada. Ms. Mary Fragidakis, the City Councillor for Ward 29, Toronto Danforth. My name is Gordon McIver. I'm the Executive Director of the National Executive Forum on Public Property and the President of the Empire Club. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table. We're also delighted to have a group of students joining us today, and this week our students come from the MBA program at Ryerson University. Students, would you please rise and be recognized? The Toronto subway, which for many is, in fact, the jewel in the crown of North America's third largest transit agency, began operations the year I was born, in 1954, and changed forever not only how residents of our city got from point A to point B, but even where they lived and worked, and where they shopped, even how they socialized. A few months before the new subway was about to commence operations, we welcomed at the Empire Club the then legendary chair of the Municipality of Metropolitan Toronto, Frederick G. Gardiner, who delivered a speech in which this upcoming opening loomed very large. It was, for many Torontonians of the day, the indisputable proof that Toronto had come of age and had a future ahead of it, which would make it one of the great cities of this world. In this November 5th, 1953 speech, Chairman Gardiner strongly emphasized the importance of the new subway that was about to open and how it would be the cornerstone of the new TTC. And I quote from that speech, "With respect to public transportation, the Toronto Transportation Commission, which has been a separate authority for 30 years, will be expanded into the Toronto Transit Commission. The new TTC will have the monopoly in respect of public transportation in the whole of the metropolitan area, with the corresponding responsibility of providing public transportation throughout the whole of this area. The City of Toronto subway, which is nearing completion and will cost approximately $60 million for the subway and rolling stock, will become the main stem of the transit system with its surface lines, trolley coaches, and bus facilities, which will provide millions of passengers every day all public transportation requirements, bringing them across great distances." Now, fast forward to April 2016, and we see what our guest speaker at the Empire Club this week has called the least funded transit system in North America, a situation that has led TTC CEO Andy Byford to become what some would refer to as a squeaky wheel, a man who's not afraid to stand up and fight for what he believes in. He has always had transit in his blood, to be sure. He did, after all, start his career as a station foreman in the London Underground in 1989. And even his grandfather had been a bus driver for London Transit. While he grew up in the beautiful city of Plymouth and remains faithful to the Plymouth Argyle Football Club to this day, his career was to take him to the far reaches of the Commonwealth, including a stint as Chief Operating Officer of Sydney, Australia's Rail Corporation. When he joined the TTC as Chief Operating Officer in November of 2011, he had already acquired all of the operational skill sets to face the challenges of our own municipality's heavily underfunded transit system. And he has never lost his focus as he fights for what he truly believes are necessary infrastructure upgrades and investments to allow this great city of ours to continue to grow and to live up to Frederick Gardner's vision of Toronto as one of the great metropolitan areas of the world. Now, at last, his call to action appears to have fallen on receptive ears. And as we heard last week when Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau addressed our club in a joint meeting of the Empire Club and the Canadian Club of Toronto, funding for Toronto Transit will finally be forthcoming. Not surprising, then, that Mr. Byford can now come to the Empire Club with a message, we hope, of hope and optimism. Now, keeping our city moving on time in a safe and efficient manner is now more than a pipe dream and will help ensure that Toronto continues to hold the position of one of the great and most livable cities in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, to tell us about the last 600 days of the TTC's modernization plan and what it will look like when it's completed in 2017, please join me in welcoming to the podium of the Empire Club of Canada for the second time in our history, the CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission, Mr. Andy Byford.
Okay. Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Mr. President. It really is an honour to be back at the Canadian Club, the Empire Club. Whoops. That's a good start. We start that again. The Empire Club. The Empire Club, of course, the Empire Club. And once again, just looking at the placeholder on the table, and you look through the luminaries who have spoken, it's quite humbling, really, to speak at such a prestigious institution. And I had the honour of signing the book with the President earlier on, and that was something that will always resonate with me throughout the rest of my career. So, Mr. President, Councillor Fragadakis, MP Vaughan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and also ACOM, thank you so much for sponsoring this. Thank you for once again affording me the honour of speaking at this, one of the premier institutions of this great country. Since I last spoke here, which seems like yesterday, but it was actually back in May 2013, a lot of water has passed under the TTC bridge. Back in May of that year, I stood up to announce the launch of the inaugural TTC 5-year corporate plan, a comprehensive top-to-bottom modernisation of the company to transform the customer's experience and to deliver a transit system that makes Toronto proud. 3 years on then, and in the penultimate year of that plan, it is good to be able to update you on progress, to celebrate successes to date, to acknowledge where we still have work to do, and to outline what is coming up as we sprint to the finish. The plan that I outlined 3 years ago is what has guided the TTC in the intervening period. Launched to our employees in no less than 83 town hall meetings, it has proved to be the foundation for relentless focus on what we need to do in spite of occasional political turmoil and in the face of relentless criticism. Anchored around 7 objectives, 5 mega projects, and literally hundreds of work streams, this plan has transformed the way that we manage our business. So taking these 7 objectives in turn, how are we doing? In the critical area of safety first, I talked about last time about the need to move to a new way of managing safety based around a concept of quantified risk. Well, in just 3 short years, we have made huge progress towards implementation of a modern safety, health, and environmental management system, a first for any North American transit. We have developed a risk register to capture and quantify key risks. We have tightened up on all aspects of operational safety, and we have embraced best practice in enterprise risk management to become leaders of all the city agencies in that discipline. Under customer, a true passion of mine, I announced changes back in May 2013 to our station management model, promising a new focus on the customer's experience. And I'm hugely proud to say, and I'm hugely proud of the fact that customer satisfaction is at an all-time high on the TTC, increasing by a statistically significant 5 points year on year between 2014 and 2015, and maintaining that high as we proceed into the first quarter of this year. We're on to our 4th iteration of the Customer Charter, a charter that has now delivered over 80 time-bound promises to our customers. On people, I stress the need for a new way of managing and motivating our employees, the most valuable asset we have. Here, I would describe our progress as nothing short of phenomenal, and it was great to hear from the table. MJ was just saying that you yourself have noticed that the staff just seem to be more motivated. We've delivered four-year negotiated deals with our unions, without recourse to arbitration, and within our financial mandate. We delivered an employee version of the customer charter, setting out mutual expectations of managers and employees. And we carried out the first ever employee engagement survey to gauge the prevailing mood of our workforce. This has given us invaluable insight into what we need to do and what we need to address to truly motivate our teams so that they excel in customer service, to give them the tools to do the job, and to unlock their potential to excel. With huge change underway and more to come, and more about that later, we recognized the need for dedicated change expertise. So we went out and recruited a top change practitioner to help us embed change and to ensure that improvements are sustained going forward. Our change director represents two other areas of huge progress. The director, a lady called Jodie Humble, came to us from Deloitte, a world-class company and not the kind of place that people used to leave to join the TTC. Jodie is also an increasing number of women in an ever more diverse TTC. Back in the day, back just a few years ago, as little as 5 years ago, the TTC had never had a female on the executive. Well, we now have 30% female representation on our executive, and it is not uncommon for men to be in the minority at meetings. Whatever next? There you go. With assets, the 2013 challenge was twofold: to make what we've currently got work more reliably and to achieve a step change in system capability. So the key to reliability is attention to detail. Greg knows all about that with our sister organisation in Go. We have changed the way we manage routes, ensuring that our procedures are customer rather than process-led. Bus reliability is up, streetcar reliability ditto. Emergency alarm activations on the subway are markedly down. Subway punctuality is up, and we have delivered reductions in Line 1 delay minutes and overall incidents of 25% and 11% respectively. So how has this been done? Better management for a start. New blood has been brought in to head up the subway and our surface routes. And our focus is changing from fix on fail to fix before fail. And we have developed route supervisors to actively manage what goes on and about the street. The dreaded short turn, you know all about that in Toronto? Well, 3 years ago, people still told me that short turns were a fact of life. You couldn't do anything about them. And that bunching was inevitable. Rubbish. I engaged a new chief service officer. We brought him in from Boston. He had a specific mandate from me: eliminate short turns and eliminate bunching. And so far, well, on some of the routes, we have reduced short turns on Queen, for example, by 90%, 90. Tangibly improved service for bus and streetcar patrons. Our growth objective has faced challenges. We opened the second platform at Union before the Pan Am Games, as promised, with our excellent contractor, Ellis Don. We now have a stunning state-of-the-art streetcar barn down on the lakeshore. Now, disappointingly, our new streetcar fleet numbers less than 20, and last week's news that Bombardier have just released their North America CEO tells me that all is still not well at Thunder Bay. But, on a positive note, the 17 cars that we do have in service are spectacularly reliable and very much appreciated by our customers. And their Toronto Rocket cousins on Line 1, the Rocket trains, are achieving reliability figures on a par with the world's best. They achieve reliability figures on a par with the best Asian metros. The Spadina extension will now open in 2017 after it proved impossible to overcome issues dating back to its inception. But just wait till you see what Toronto and York are going to get in terms of a spectacular railway extension. On financial stability, and Doug touched upon this earlier, there is good news to report. So our 3-year record of lobbying, or being the squeaky wheel, our 3-year campaign came good with a record investment in transit by Mayor Tory and City Councillor Fragadakis at the fore. Thank you for your support. Enabling us to deliver a huge expansion in service, including, wait for it, earlier Sunday service on the subway. There you go. On the capital front, we await with bated breath the dollar amount that Ottawa say is coming our way. And we've calculated around $850 million because for the first time, the allocation will be based on ridership, not pro rata. And Adam, as a member of the government, I really salute you for that. That is a huge step forward, and that will transform this city as we apply that funding to projects that the city desperately needs. And finally, reputation, the seventh objective, is really driven by how well we do on the other 6 objectives and our ability to get things right, at least for most of the time. Now, the fact that we delivered a flawless Pan Am Games was a real step in the right direction. We just need to make that level of service the norm. So, 3 years in, what remains to be done? Well, job one for me this year is to finish off the rollout of Presto with our partners at Metrolinx. Around 30 stations are now Presto enabled, including Main Street Station that features the new style automatic gates. All streetcars accept Presto, and we have introduced all-door boarding on all 11 routes of the TTC, key initiatives to speed up service. Now we will finish all the stations by the end of the year and the bus fleet, around 2,000 buses and Wheel-Trans, thereby delivering Smart Card and the efficiencies that Presto will bring 1 year ahead of schedule. At the turn of the year, tokens, transfers and tickets will be confined to TTC history, and our collectors will vacate their booths to offer a friendly, proactive service out in the station with their customers. 2016 will see all stations Wi-Fi enabled by the end of Q1 and cell service on all stations by the year end. This year, we will complete construction of the TYSSE stations, ready for systems installation, testing and commissioning, and trial operations, ready for a December 2017 opening. That new line will, of course, need a new signal system, and that will be the second phase of the new automatic train system currently being implemented on Line 1. The first phase of which will go live from north of DuPont from the fall of next year. Throw into the mix more work to drive up service reliability, more work on culture, further service improvement, and it truly is a sprint to the finish. Now, of course, this is only the start of the job. There's huge amounts more to do as we move to the next 5-year iteration of our corporate objectives. So working with Metrolinx and our partners at City Planning, there is a whole raft of other projects to now deliver. And our next 5-year plan, under development now, has an equally impressive checklist and suite of projects to get started with. The Scarborough Subway Extension, Smart Track, the Relief Line, Waterfront LRT, Crosstown, all must be progressed if we're to maintain the momentum and consensus that seems to have finally been achieved. And the TTC will be front and centre in each of those signature projects. Further ahead, we are developing a master plan for the complete route modernisation of Line 2, new trains, new signals, and potentially a new yard. Now, more immediate challenges remain. Our service is not yet as robust as it should be as we continue to grapple with ever-ageing infrastructure and ever-rising customer numbers. And I cringe every time I see customers being loaded onto shuttle buses for unplanned closures. We must continue to drive down the root causes of failure. Difficult issues must continue to be tackled. No one likes subway closures, but they are essential if we are to give our crews the time and space that they need to replace worn-out track and signals. And there remains a small minority, and I stress that, a small minority of employees whose actions embarrass us from time to time and that have not yet embraced the new customer service and accountability paradigm. We will continue to cherish, support, and stick up for the overwhelming majority of TTC staff who do a good job and who set out every day, day in and day out, to delight their customers and to deliver excellent service. But we will not let poor performers off the hook, especially the few that break the rules and provide fuel for our critics. Mr. President, we are delivering change to the TTC on an unprecedented scale, a 5-year transformation that would take most organisations double that to achieve. And all this, and I'm going to repeat it again, all this on what is still the lowest subsidised transit in North America. So it's for that reason that I call the much maligned TTC staff our miracle workers, and I want to salute and thank them for what has been achieved thus far. Now, let me just finish by describing a future journey on the TTC. So just imagine this. You arrive on a modern, spotlessly clean, articulated bus at a state-of-the-art, architecturally stunning station that does not currently exist on a subway extension that is not yet a reality. You use your Presto card at the all-new gate line to enter the station, and you're greeted by a customer service assistant with a new uniform, probably with an iPad to give you information on what you need and to tell you where you need to go. You go down to the platform on what is, of course, a fully accessible station to make a phone call while you wait the short period for your train to arrive. An immaculately clean Toronto Rocket train pulls in, one-person operation in automatic mode. It leaves on time, and you arrive at your interchange ready to seamlessly transfer, again using your Presto card, onto a low-floor, air-conditioned streetcar. It sounds utopian, doesn't it? Well, it isn't a dream, Mr. President. This will be reality in less than 600 days as we drive relentlessly to the finish line and a transit system that makes Toronto proud. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we thank our speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Byford has kindly agreed to take a couple of questions. And while you're gathering your thoughts, I'd like to throw a first one out. Obviously, what happened in Belgium a few weeks ago must have had you wincing and grimacing. I mean, it's a horrid scenario for anybody that runs a transit system. When things like that happen, is there a reaction at the Toronto level where you actually sit down and go, okay, let's check our systems again? Or is all that already in place so much that it's just you go on as usual?
It's a very topical question, obviously, and it's one that never leaves you. I'm a former operations director, so you kind of obsess about that kind of eventuality, but also just always trying to envisage what could possibly happen. So what you shouldn't do is just react to things. You should be being proactive about things. So we have a very carefully worked through and trained security escalation procedures. So we have procedures to escalate if something were to happen. But we also have various training programs that we undertake and specific actions that we take were the security situation to deteriorate. We take advice from CSIS and we take advice from sister organizations such as the Tube. But as someone who was an operational manager through the 1980s and the late and the early 90s when the Tube was having all sorts of issues with the troubles in Northern Ireland, and as the person who was operations director led the operational response to the July 7 bombings in London. I had to manage the evacuation on southeastern trains. I can tell you it is something that we are very focused on. I don't want to say too more than that, but it is the kind of nightmare scenario that we never want to have happen here.
Questions for Mr. Byford? We have a roving mic here. So, oh, yes, MJ.
I'm going to ask you to bear with me. This is a question from a friend who spent the night in the ER with his mum, so couldn't be here, and he did not have the benefit of hearing your speech. In 1890, we had a population in the country of 4.7 million. Today, the GTA alone has a population of more than 6 million. In 1890, we had a national dream to span the country with a railway to enhance and spur our economic growth. It would seem our lack of progress on the transit file has to do more with vision than resources or population density. Can you comment?
Well, I think the good news is, I mean, I'd like to put a sort of positive response to this. I think we're on the cusp of, and I kind of alluded to it in my few words, I think we're on the cusp of a real golden age in transit in this city, and not just this city, but in the GTHA generally. Because if you think about how many projects are either underway, and I talked about some of them, new vehicles and subway extensions, etc. But what we're doing with our colleagues at Metrolinx, all of the advances on Presto, the fact that lines like Smart Track, the Relief Line, the Waterfront LRT are tangibly close now. I actually think we're on the cusp of breaking that kind of mindset, and with the government's commitment to infrastructure funding, with City Council's commitments in terms of an increase in operational expenditure and subsidy to the TTC, I think things can only get better. I think the fact that people are frustrated about the congestion in the GTHA, and the fact that most people are saying, can we just stop talking and start digging? I think we can really leverage that, and we're on the cusp of a real transformation of transportation in this, not just city, but the region as well.
Question here.
I'm a user of the TTC. First of all, I'm wondering what number or percentage of employees will be displaced by these changes. That's number one. Number two, how expensive will the Presto card be, and will it be subsidized? And number three, what will the condo explosion mean to transportation?
Sure. In terms of displacement, if what you are alluding to is do these changes mean that people's jobs disappear, what is actually going to happen is that jobs will change. So, for example, where Presto comes in, there is absolutely no point in having a collector when there's nothing to collect. And I was at the division the other day, and the collectors totally get that because you're not just going to sit there in a booth when there's very little money to collect and there's no tokens. So the job will change. We will migrate. We'll re-engineer the collectors into being very proactive, very customer-focused customer service agents. On the condo issue, condos are a challenge to us. I mean, I was just with Councillor Mark Grimes the other day. We were discussing the explosion of condos being built down on the lakeshore down in Etobicoke. And to a certain extent, the TTC is struggling to play catch-up in places like Etobicoke, in places like Liberty Village, because there's all these beautiful new condos going up. And I have to say, I look at them and I think, how the hell are we going to carry all these people? But we have to bite that bullet, which is why we're introducing bigger vehicles and rolling out more capacity. With Presto, I mean, if the Presto system, the question I'm most asked, and I think it's possibly what's behind your question, is what happens to Metro passes? Will you end up paying more? No. The Metro pass as a product will not be in the form of a ticket, but Metro pass will be loaded onto Presto. You will not pay more than you would have had. It will cap out at what you would have paid. Okay.
Should we take one more question?
Sure.
Howard.
Andy, terrific presentation. Two quick questions. Be interested in your thoughts of why you believe it's taken so long for the evolution of the TTC, particularly in things like collection of you want to put tokens, but it seems you can't even get a token, multiple tokens at multiple spots. That's now evolution is coming together. The other thought I have is what is happening in terms of the relationship with TTC and Metrolinx to help facilitate the 2-hour transit visits that people have, 2-hour transit for people coming from the 905 area to the city. And this is obviously a concern if we're going to take account of that growing 905 population boom, but still having the jobs primarily in the city.
Okay. I mean, to the first question, I mean, one of the marks of my tenure has been, let's just get on with some of these improvements. So hopefully the list that I read out gave you some indication of that. There were certain things that seemed to me when I turned up were just kind of a nonsense. The fact that, for example, you couldn't use a debit or credit card. And I was given lots of excuses as to why you couldn't. Well, can we just get on with it? It's 2012 as it was at that point. So we're fast-tracking change. We rolled out a series of what I call quick wins. So things like enhanced cleanliness, enhanced information, things that show the customers that we mean business and that we're serious about improvement, while the time is taken to do the things that take longer, like buy new vehicles, build extensions, etc. In terms of 2-hour transfers, it's part of the wider debate about what's going to happen in the future with the GTHA. People often say to me, are we going to have integrated fares? Absolutely, we should be moving towards integrated fares. The good news is the glue, if you like, the enabler for integrated fares and for things like time-based transfers, which are expensive, but it's the kind of thing we could look at, or even zonal fares or fare by distance. The enabler for that is Presto. And the reason for that is because Presto, it's a big advantage, it's pan-GTHA. It's not just the TTC, it's Brampton, Mississauga, even Ottawa have Presto, okay? So I think you're about to see, as part of that golden age that I referred to, I think in addition to new services, as in new lines, you'll also be able to see a much more dynamic mix. I like to think, and I'm convinced that we can do this, we can leap, certainly for the TTC, we can leap from sort of being at the back of the class right to the forefront in all the various things that we've talked about today.
Thank you so much, Andy. And there's so much to talk about. I mean, we just have to have you back a third time.
I'll be honored. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doug. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, here to express our collective appreciation, Mr. Doug Elling.
Thank you, Mr. President, Andy, and head table guests. We're most honored to have the opportunity to sponsor this event. AECOM is involved in many projects for both Metrolinx and TTC, and we're thrilled to be able to do that. I was going to talk a little bit about those projects, but I did want to mention that I am a long-standing and long-suffering Leicester City supporter, and I can now reveal my allegiance, and that may be an inside joke, but hopefully some of you get it. In any event, I did want to talk about some of the AECOM projects, but instead, after listening to Andy, I wanted to recognize the fact that he has been a great leader and a great promoter for the TTC, and he's been a driver of improved transit service and for the citizens of Toronto. And his focus on service and quality improvements have greatly enhanced the user experience and improved the public perception of the system. And so much that when AECOM is looking at the next 5 years and we're looking at where to locate our offices, one of the things that is giving us rise to consider coming back to the downtown is the current state of the transit system. Both the TTC and the regional system run by Metrolinx. So it's a huge part of our decision-making process. We'll be thrilled to come back into the city of Toronto where we think our future employees are, but a big piece of that is a result of the work that Andy and your staff have done. So thank you, Andy. We are pleased to have sponsored this event today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much again to our speaker, and thank you to our generous sponsor, AECOM. Thank you again, Doug and Angela. Really appreciate you being here. Also like to thank the National Post, which is our national print sponsor, and of course Rogers TV, which is our national broadcaster. We'd also like to thank mediaevents.ca, which is Canada's online event space, for live webcasting today's event at the global level. Please follow us on Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. We're at Empire_Club. And you can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Please join us again. We have some extraordinary events coming up in the following weeks. We have a panel discussion on physician-assisted suicide, very topical, called Navigating the New Canadian Right, and that will be featuring Dr. James Downer, Shanaz Gokal, who's the new CEO of Dying with Dignity, and Pia Chattopadhyay, the host of CBC Radio and TVO Television. That'll be right here, that'll be at the Royal York Hotel on April 26th. We have the Honourable Navdeep Bains, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, on April 29th, right here in the Arcadian Court. We have William Chernetsky, the Chief Health Innovation Strategist for the province of Ontario, on May the 4th at 1 King West. And we just booked Beverly McLaughlin, the head of the Supreme Court of Canada, who will actually be kicking off our sesquicentennial, and I had to practice that word, Canada's 150th anniversary. That we will be kicking off on June 3rd of this year, as we prepare for our celebrations next year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance today, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.